Monday, November 11th, and this is the morning meeting. Thanks everybody for joining. Grateful to have you. Dan, Sean, and I are delighted to start the week with you here 6 days after Election Day, with still a lot of questions about the Trump transition, the Trump presidency, and of course the Democratic Party. We're going to talk about all that today. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. Lots of new folks I can see already. I'm like the host of Romper Room. I see you. Grateful to have you here. Peace, love, and understanding is our watchword. Please don't pollute the chat with negativity. Extend the presumption of grace to all. Best thing that happened on this platform last week, I think, was the number of Harris voters we heard from who said they were dealing with what happened better than their fellow Harris voters because they were able to interact with Trump voters on two-way. And we're pleased with that because that's really one of the original purposes of this platform. And we'll continue that going. We'll have some things to announce here later in the program about what we're going to do with the Democrats to be productive in talking about the future of the party. And we'll have an announcement for those of you who are interested in getting jobs in the Trump administration. So stand by for that. For now, gentlemen, good morning. Sean, what would you like to talk about today before I run through the day book?
Well, I would just like to say Happy Veterans Day to all those who have served.
Amen.
Thank you for giving us the freedom to do things like this and to express ourselves. And then that's it. I'm just excited.
Okay. Happy Veterans Day is good. Dan, opening remark from you of the same duration of Sean's, maybe.
Just also Happy Veterans Day. It's a new week, and I think we continue to not lack for content to discuss these days.
True enough. If you're here on the two-way platform, please, again, don't pollute the chat, but you are able to also ask questions. And if you want to ask a question, please raise your electronic hand. As always, we like multiple people who've been here before, but we like new people too. And very much would like to hear from Harris supporters as well as Trump supporters. So please raise your hand to be part of the conversation. All are welcome. The president and the vice president are going to Arlington today to do a ceremony together, 11 Eastern time, participate in a wreath laying, and then the vice president at 11:15 will attend the president's remarks, observing National Veterans Day observance at the Memorial Amphitheater. That's it for their public events. Congress is still scattered about, although a lot of focus on the leadership elections, particularly in the Senate, and the question of who the new majority leader will be. Donald Trump has no public events today, but he's handing out jobs like candy canes at Bloomingdale's on Christmas to various people without necessarily running through the formal process. And we'll talk about that now. Sean, so here's how I see the major developments in the transition personnel. He eliminated the participation of Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. He gave Elise Stefanik a job, I think, without going. And he made Homans the border czar, Tom Homans. What do you see in those, or any other personnel things that you see that you think are clues to where we're headed overall?
First, on process, don't be surprised. I mean, in 2016, I get a phone call a couple times a day. Sean, ready for release, announce so-and-so. You're going to see some of the ones he wants to just get out of the way announced.
Yeah.
I don't expect it's anyway. I don't think that's a surprise. It's how he operates, and I think you're going to see more of that over the next few days on both the staff and the cabinet, sub-cabinet type jobs. Here's what I read out of that. I talked to a lot of people specifically about the Pompeo issue, and it was what it all came down to was Pompeo made very public comments about January 6th and the president's culpability, as well as some other policy issues that had been left over from state. And there was a huge push that from inside that said no one who has been vocally a critic of you should be able to get a job. And then you look at a guy like Tom Homan, who has been loyal to the core, who knows how to address that number one issue of immigration and border security. So I think this is literally, I mean, taken together, you're going to see a lot of people in those top jobs who the president feels have stood by him through thick and thin. And so anyway, that's I think you're going to see much more of that, mostly in the areas that matter to him. So on Homeland Security, on budget, I expect in the DoD realm, you are going to see people who are not traditional. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. They really want to clean house and get things done and affect change. And we talked about this last week with the generals. The mindset of a lot of the folks that I'm speaking with is we want people from day one that are going to go in and attack the president's agenda without fear of retribution from, the bureaucracy or whatever.
Dan, before you respond, I'll just annotate a little bit what Sean said, and he's spot on as far as my reporting goes. I'm amazed Pompeo made it as far into the process, in the abstract as he did, because beyond the things that are on the public record, he did a lot of things behind the scene that if Don Jr. found out, it would be just an absolute no-go. And I suspect some of those things got back to Mar-a-Lago. The chaos of this, if you've ever worked in a presidential transition, which are all like campaigns, they are chaotic, right? There's lots of different power centers. Some people are taking breaks. Susie Wiles was out west, I'm told, and so it's a chaotic thing. But this is crazy chaotic because, as Sean said, the president-elect will bestow jobs on people without telling anybody because he happens to run into them. It's like, hey, you have, what job do you want? Oh, I want this job. Oh, let me tweet it. Let me put on Truth Social that you got the job. And again, there's much less tolerance for people who've criticized the president in the past. So if you're someone who hasn't, if you're known as a loyalist and you want a job, you're more likely to get it quick without any necessarily background check or the transition team knowing you're getting the job. It's very chaotic. Dan.
Two things that I'm curious about is one, by picking Elise Stefanik, is how big is that House majority? And in 2005, the Democrats' ability to win special elections in kind of swing red districts was a sign that they were getting new candidates, that they were finding a new message to kind of get off the mat. So how many other House candidates get picked and what happens here to replace Stefanik? The second, I just found it amazing that usually if you're passed over for a position the way Pompeo and Haley were, you don't put out an ass-kissing statement just telling the person who passed over you and almost humiliated you how great they are. It really does speak to just the power of Trump in the party right now, and that even when humiliated, people still feel they need to kiss the rear end.
Dan, do you think the way I read that, and I'm intrigued by what you brought up. I read that as, oh crap, I'm going to lose my clients now.
Yeah.
And I read that.
Yeah,
I mean, you need to keep your
access. Be in good stead. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be alone on the island twisting in the wind the next 4 years.
Clients and boards. Boards are even better than clients because it's less work.
Yeah, that was being all encompassing. But I mean, boards, speaking engagements, all the stuff where people want to know, what your inside take. And if they don't think that they think you're completely on the island, off the island, then you're not going to get anything. I think that was the view.
Yeah. The House majority thing is an issue, but I do think Walz of Florida will get a big job. I do think Radcliffe will get a big job.
Right.
Yeah, he's not there anymore. Yeah, but so Walz did that, but then separately, I think two of the big national security jobs will go to Radcliffe and Walz. I also think, despite what Sean and I said last week, that the press secretary might be a man. Last week I was sure it'd be a woman. Now I think it might be a man.
There are a couple, and it won't take much for people to think about who has been strong defenders on certain networks. But and I look in the chat. You guys are equally tuned in.
Yes, Scott could be the press secretary. What he did was singular, and they want somebody in the job who will be like the way he was for under very adverse circumstances. So don't be surprised if he becomes the press secretary. All right, the Senate Majority Leader race. Rick Scott has thrown himself in. He's supported by lots of very top MAGA people. Donald Trump has not endorsed him, but no one, I think, would be under any illusions of who he probably favors given his relationships with the three of them. These contests are like party chair races. They're inside games. And normally when outsiders try to come in, they don't succeed. It's a secret ballot, so people can tell Donald Trump, sure, I'm going to be for your candidate if he endorsed. They don't have to be. I think this may be an exception. And people who cover the Hill more than I do will say I'm naive, that there are no exceptions. These are always inside contests. But I think if Donald Trump goes all in for Rick Scott, he's got a chance. But I still put my money on Thune. I think Thune is the establishment choice. And although there's plenty of MAGA in the Senate, there's still more establishment. Sean.
I think you're right on the House stuff. The Senate jockeying for Secretary of State between Haggerty and Rubio is intriguing. It's funny because we talk about the trickle effect, right? And you think Rubio leaves, DeSantis appoints, and there's a couple avenues down there. I've heard everything from certain names that DeSantis would appoint to DeSantis steps down, Nunes becomes governor and appoints him. I don't know that Trump would be cool with that, but I don't know that DeSantis cares anymore. But each one of these things is like it's like a Tetris game. You're trying to plug it in and then get the next one to line up. So it's going to be interesting. And also as you move one, you kind of go, okay, now that gets blocked out. So who else was angling for UN ambassador? Okay, well, Elise gets that. Now they're going to all go jockey for, ambassador to NATO or something. So
Sean, is Trump's life much better if Rick Scott's majority leader as opposed to Thune or Cornyn?
I think so.
So do you think he'll go for it and try to get it for him?
I have been trying to figure that one out all like the last 2 days, whether like part of me says that Trump is going to look at the numbers. And if they can bring to him a number where it says Rick Scott is at 17, 18, 19 votes, and so currently, it's a three-way race, and here's who it breaks down. Your endorsement will get him over the top. He'll do it. If they can't show him a path to victory, I'm hesitant to think that he would jump in. But if the Scott folks can show him that his endorsement would take him over the top in a three-way race, I think it's there.
So a specific whip count. These are the votes you'll get if
right.
you endorse. Yeah.
Right. And or just, hey, there's three away. There's no way that these senators that are going to be in cycle will defy you now, right?
Right.
I think a senator that just got reelected or that's 4 years out might be a little less concerning. But the one thing I will tell you where some people are off is they say, well, these senators are insulated because they might not be in cycle. I still think, you saw what he did to a couple of those guys, Jeff Flake, and it just where they don't want to be on the outside at the beginning. And so I
totally agree
that Scott can, this could really, what's going on in the last few days with all of these people publicly coming out, whether it's Elon or Charlie Kirk, for Senator Scott is huge. And I think that people are misreading the Senate by saying that senators are going to find this, unappealing because it's a secret vote.
Dan, can a president in a secret vote somehow extract a commitment that's meaningful, or there's no way?
I think the issue is it going to be a secret vote? That's a party rule. The next campaign I'm watching for is to bring this out in the open. If you're the outsider and you're saying we're going to shake up the swamp and we're going to do things differently, I would start calling for a public vote, because then
brilliant.
And then
someone in Mar-a-Lago's on the horn right now saying
they would break the Senate in 30 seconds. Not a single Republican will publicly go to war with the online army and Donald Trump with maximum capital right now. I think it probably would almost be unanimous, and I think the others may even fold their tent.
Wow.
Yeah, I think whether it's a public event or we force the whip count out in public,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Wow, but people will lie.
No. I agree. Yeah. I think I have a feeling that what Dan just said is going to happen by COB.
You think people would say publicly, I endorse Rick Scott for majority leader and then not vote for him?
Sure, it happens in House races all the time. I remember very well the whole Rosa DeLauro, Bob Menendez. I mean, I'm dating myself now, going way back. All those times Steny Hoyer thought he had.
But isn't that usually private commitments? They tell somebody privately, I'm for you, not a public declaration.
Yeah, but I
don't think so. Big difference.
There's no accountability.
No, right? There's no accountability. But it's one thing to say, I'm not telling people publicly, and then to say to somebody, I'm with you, and then not be. It's another to put out a statement on social media or a press release and say, I'm for Rick Scott. I know I'll be mocked by Hill people, as I was last night when I raised this on Twitter, for saying that this is anything but an inside game. But I think Sean and I agree, and maybe Dan does too, that Trump is just so powerful right now because of the scope of his victory. And the reality is, no offense to the two Johns, but they are not MAGA. They're just not. So why should a MAGA president have a non-MAGA majority leader? When there's somebody on offer. I still think Thune probably going to win, but
it's gotten flagged, but this should not go unnoticed. Susie Wiles is very close to Senator Scott as well.
Oh yeah.
And so you've got this confluence of connections from Rick Scott to the Trump world. And then obviously this outside influence that's happening. I mean, Rick Scott has, I think you always talk about, we talked about it for the last few weeks, cresting at the right time in a campaign. And right now, getting into Wednesday, this is good news for Rick Scott.
Yeah.
I mean,
And of course, he ran
the
to be.
GOP senators don't like Rick Scott. They love Thune. They love Cornyn, but it doesn't matter, right? All power lies at Mar-a-Lago. Like, absolutely.
Well, but that's the question, because normally it would all be an inside game. So it's going to be an interesting test. Even if he doesn't formally endorse, again, there's no ambiguity about who the MAGA candidate is. All right. Again, if you want to get in the conversation, if you're on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. Dan, go ahead.
Mark, I think we might have a loyal listener who might have an interesting take in the online. He comes from the other side of the Capitol, but he has pretty good judgment on this type of stuff.
Yeah. Do you know that he wants to weigh in on this matter?
I've been told his hand is raised.
All right, Mr. Speaker, do you want to tell us what's going to happen with the House of Lords?
Of course, this might be what we get as a Democrat calling on.
No, I was just exercising my prerogative as a historian.
Yeah.
And after Chappaquiddick, Bob Byrd challenged Teddy Kennedy. And Teddy Kennedy had more than enough votes to win, except it was a secret ballot. And when it was over, Kennedy said there were apparently 9 more senators than he was aware of, based on his count and Byrd's count, because a number of senators said to both of them, "Oh, I'm for you." So I think this notion that it can't be done, and of course we're talking, as you said, we're talking about the august Senate and not the kind of more staid behavior that we in the House expect. But I think it's very possible. I do think it's intriguing. And you guys may have really started something to suggest that they have an open vote. But the other point I'd make, and it's really something I hope President Trump understands, no one in the American system is all powerful. The system's designed to ensure that no one is all powerful. They can be pretty powerful. Roosevelt discovered this when he tried to pack the court at the peak of his popularity and just got killed by the Senate. Turning him down brutally. The president's got to think this through. He's certainly far and away the most influential Republican in the country, but he's also got to think through how many people does he bruise who decide to get even later. Yeah. And there are lots of, as John McCain proved on the final vote on Obamacare, independently elected people have abilities to hit you in ways you never dreamed of.
Let me ask you 3 rapid round questions and then see if Dan and Sean have any. Number 1, do you agree that Donald Trump's legislative agenda has a better chance of passing and quickly if it's Scott as opposed to Thune or Cornyn, or no?
I think it depends on whether or not President Trump and Rick Scott can then pull together the people they just ran over.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, you got to ask, you always have to say, and then what? Right. Because there's always the next game. But I do think that Scott clearly, if the Senate decides it wants to end the McConnell model, then Scott's clearly far and away the boldest and most radical. But on the other hand, the Senate is a club, and he is the least clubbable of the 3 guys.
Second, do you think it'd be smart for the president to endorse?
If he can win.
Yeah, that's what Sean said. And lastly, he's already apparently taken 1 House member out. She's in a safe seat, but it's going to take a while to have a special election. If the president-elect asked you, should I continue to take House members out, what would you tell him?
To talk a lot with Johnson. I mean, Mike is going to have an enormously hard problem. And unlike the Senate, where governors can immediately replace the missing senator, you've got to go through, every state has unique election provisions. I think in Elisa's case, New York will take about 60 days to get a new member. Well, that means you have 60 days with an empty Republican seat, and I'm guessing that their probable margin is 5 or 6. That's already almost impossible to manage. And if you then get it down to 2, and one of them decides you got to go home for the weekend, I mean, Johnson has the hardest job in Washington today.
Yeah, she could keep her seat obviously until she's confirmed, and maybe the process would be different at that point. Sean or Dan, questions for the speaker?
Mr. Speaker, there's a prevailing sentiment that the senators are immune from outside influences right now. I've obviously disagree with that. What do you think?
I think they're far more resistant than House members are, both because of the election cycle and because in the Senate, virtually everybody every morning combs the hair of a future president and waits patiently for the current guy to finish screwing up so they can become the person that gets to run. So there's just a very different psychology being in the Senate. But I think if the pressure is large enough, if it begins to be a question of how do I go back home, because the problem becomes Trump is sufficiently popular among Republicans that if you're a Republican senator who wants to go home in the next 90 days, do you really want to be the guy who stood up against Donald Trump and have every person at the local diner or the local grocery store? I had this happen when I fought Bush on taxes. And even though I clearly represented the party base, there were enough Bush loyalists that would come up to me and say, "You're a traitor." And they weren't negotiating or discussing. They were rendering judgment. And so I think that kind of pressure, I mean, President Trump is in an unusual position of moral authority inside the Republican Party in a way that I can't remember, even with Reagan. I don't remember quite this level of intensity.
Dan.
Far be it for me to question our preeminent historian here. Now, I mean, I guess my only question might be what you think of Trump's push for recess appointments. And
well, I think it tells you what 4 years of being able to think about what you learned starts to do for you. I think in the back of his head, he has a checklist of everything that could screw up getting things done. And I believe because I think he instinctively knows that the 2026 election is the real crucible. And that therefore he has to build such momentum that people decide, like Roosevelt in 34, that they have enough hope in where he's going, that they're going to give him a few more seats. And that means he's got to be able to move fast. And he learned painfully that the system's designed to not move fast, and even when you want it to, and he's going to have a lot of folks trying to stop him. So I think you'll see him do a series of things that have been pretty well thought out. And this is partly the America First Policy Institute's work. But they've thought through and they've gamed out how do we clear the runway, and what are the things that could stop us? And this is a small but telling example of how many detailed thoughts there have been about this administration.
You know, I will tell you
Go ahead,
the point that the speaker just made can't be underscored. The 4 years that these guys spent out of power, America First Policy Institute, the Heritage Foundation have all been saying, okay, well, how do we take that policy that was talked about, write it all out? Who are the right people to staff it? How do we get it through? How do we overcome these obstacles? I think when I said this earlier, you're going to see President Trump come out of the gate on January 20th in a way that I don't think anybody's fully appreciating now. They know what they want to do, how they want to do it, and whom they want it to do in a way that you wouldn't have had in back-to-back administrations.
And let me just say one last thing. I'll get out of your way, Mark. But to build on what Sean just said, it's not January 20th. He's already negotiating the end of the Ukraine war. I mean, you know, Trump is moving every day. I'm sure he and Elon Musk are thinking through the nature of the commission Musk will head up to profoundly change the domestic government. And so, I mean, I think Trump will have done more between now and getting sworn in than probably any president in history.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Sean's point about how it's not a back-to-back term. So he had 4 years to think about it. He's got in Susie someone who's a great implementer. He knows what he wants to do. And the Democrats, of course, are divided and dispirited. And some of them are going to want to work with him because I think it's the right thing to do for the country and politically. So he's in a very, very strong position. And coming in January. Mr. Speaker, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
And by the way, for all the Democrats thinking this is a conspiracy, this is exactly what the Democrats do when they're out of power at the Center for American Progress in Brookings. You have a shadow government. People who want to serve in the next administration go to think tanks and law firms to kind of spin their wheels and plan their next, opportunity at power. This is how the game works.
Guys, 2 more topics, then we'll get to questions. First is the meeting on Wednesday with President Biden, President Trump. Dan, if you're Team Biden, what do you want to have come out of that?
I think you want to be gracious and you want to be accommodating and you want to be the opposite. You know, obviously they didn't meet in 2020, both because of Trump's posture and COVID and various things. I think Biden will just want to be seen as gracious and doing the right thing. And that, I think, is the best way for him to kind of stick the middle finger at how he was treated. Just keep your chin up.
And Sean, what does Donald Trump want out of this?
I think he wants that imagery. When Trump walked in the Oval Office on January 20th, 2017, and he saw the letter that Obama had left for him. He was truly moved by it. He couldn't, to him, to see this person who, while wasn't someone he ran against, but obviously spoke very extensively about, write this letter to him about what he, how the well-wishing that he had for him and how he wanted him to succeed as an American, not as a partisan, was very moving to Trump. And I think that Trump is one of those guys that really believes you duke it out and then you kind of shake your hands and you kind of go, and so I think he wants that moment. He wants the cameras where there's that imagery of Biden handing it over to him. My guess is that he's going to be very magnanimous, and he wants to show that sort of we fought it out, it's over, and now I'm going to move on. It's only when he feels he's being attacked does he actually go into that mode. So I think this is going to be a big moment for him, just in terms of the imagery.
I agree with everything you both said, except if Joe Biden demonstrates a loss of mental acuity, I think Donald Trump will make fun of him for it afterwards. Afterwards, I think he will.
I think afterwards might mean 6 months.
Yeah. When it's next germane to his interests.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even in the debate, the one debate they had when Biden really stepped in, I actually thought Trump had a brief moment of empathy and did not step on his throat.
Yeah.
He didn't have to, but if he wasn't going to do it in the debate, I don't think he'd do it in the White House.
Okay, last topic is the Democrats. And again, Dan, why don't you tell people now what we plan to do as a special part of Two-Way Tonight going forward with Democrats?
Sure. So, I mean, I think we have heard the feedback on this platform that people are very curious about, where the Democrats go from here. People want to understand and kind of watch this process. And so Mark and I and Sean, you're welcome to help in a positive way, are going to bring Democrats on, whether at the federal, state, local level, think tanks, former members of Congress or former governors, who have a perspective on this, who either have been through it in the past when the party has been out of power or are currently a part of this dynamic, and really try to be a home as Democrats work through this process and come out the other end. And we hope you'll tune in and tell your friends all about it.
Yeah. So just as there's things you've already seen on Two-Way, conversations that aren't taking place literally anywhere else in America, we don't think there's another forum where people are going to get an hour or more to talk about these issues on a regular basis. Cable news might give them 3 minutes and it'll be contentious. C-SPAN is C-SPAN. We're going to have sophisticated, long conversations here about how the Democrats can rebuild the party, how they can operate during Donald Trump's presidency, how they can select a leader for the Democratic Party in January, how they can think about the midterms, how they can think about the next presidential. So we'd urge all Democrats to come and be part of it. We'll start announcing some of the guests that we have, but we want grassroots too. And Republicans, of course, welcome to participate as well. But please join us in that. So let's look at a tweet, which is the 10th of 10 tweets from Senator Murphy of Connecticut over the weekend. One of the few Democrats, Ro Khanna did it, a few others did it, to try to start to lay down their point of view about what went wrong. And of course, Senator Sanders has to. Can you put up that tweet? 101, here we go. So, break with neoliberalism, listen to poor and rural people, men in crisis, don't decide for them, pick fights, embrace populism, build a big tent, be less judgmental, but we are beyond small fixes. You saw over the weekend, Kamala Harris's former communications director, Jamal Simmons, say Biden should step down to let her be the first woman president. Idiotic idea, won't happen. But behind that idiotic idea is a really smart point that I've talked to Jamal, but I bet he said is part of his thinking, which is they need to do big things the way Donald Trump did. And you think the garbage truck and McDonald's weren't big things? They were big things, big dramatic flourishes that are part of relating to people. So Dan, what have you seen? Let's be positive. What have you seen since Friday's show, besides maybe the Murphy tweets, that make you think some people in the party at least have a sense of how to come back?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think in all seriousness that everything we're seeing is good. I mean, you kind of need to go through this. Like you do need to have finger pointing. You do need to have the episode on CNN the other day that I tweeted out over the weekend, where the one of the guests just kind of cut somebody off talking about transgender and accused them of being transphobic. Like all of this has to happen. I think in the immediate, what is most encouraging for me is that the progressive wing of the party seems to be in agreement that there has to be change and that the party has to kind of move to the center a little bit. The fact that even Jay Powell is saying we've lost people culturally, you know, Bernie Sanders and Pelosi are arguing over whether it's culture or economic, but I have not seen a progressive leader come out and wave people off to say, hey, this was really a close margin. There's nothing to see here. Like, you know, we just have to fight harder. There's none of that. And so I think the fact that everyone is in agreement, things have to change. Everyone is in agreement that we've kind of lost the working class and that culturally we're too far to the left. Those are good foundations. Now it really is going to be, you know, the candidates that emerge, the agenda that is formed. I think you'll see multiple people starting to road test new messages who are thinking about 2028. Thinking about running for governor in 2026. And so I think there are encouraging signs.
Sean, as you look at the other party, do you see them as even a factor in the next couple months or not?
I think it depends on exactly what Dan said. Like how do they actually look to have a, like I call it, you know, family fight. Like you got to get in there. It's got to be a little dirty of, here's what we got to do. There's some mechanical things. There's some messaging things. You know, they were doing this a little on the roundtable on this week. And the question is, how much denial is there and how much are they willing to say, yeah, I get it. We got to make changes. And if they put more head in the sand than anything else, or can't come to agreed upon ideas, then I think they're headed in a bad place. If there can be some clarity to what's going on, then that's healthy for them.
All right.
Yeah,
Here come
I
your.
also, can I just add that one of the big
Go ahead.
parts of a comeback sometimes is opportunity. When the Afghanistan withdrawal went sideways, it was an opportunity to kind of say they're weak and they're not. All these experts and competence is a fraud. When the border started falling apart, like, we don't know what those opportunities will be that are going to come in the next 6 to 9 months. But do you seize it, and does it play to your contrast of a new direction? And like, we stand for something, we're fighting for you. And I have no doubt something or things will emerge.
Okay, great. Bring up folks in. Tell us where you are, who you supported for president, and what's on your mind, Mr. Reagan. You paid for this microphone. Go ahead.
You on mute?
Oh, he was, but now he's not again. Go ahead, unmute again.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I am a conflicted Reagan Democrat, and I want to deconflict my party with reimagining what we do as Democrats, keeping our democratic values, but getting rid of the woke. I really think the criticism that we embraced and lost the cultural story is true. I mean, I think I've been personally conflicted about a lot of that, both from my faith perspective and just from the same common sense that everybody has been, you know, speaking from, that we as Democrats have been making these crazy, convoluted, tortured arguments. They're, you know, like really egghead arguments about how to justify what life is and when it begins, or how to justify the whole gender versus sex question. And people just shake their heads and throw up their hands and say, you guys, I can't relate to you. You guys are weird. And I remember when Tim Walz was making the argument about Republicans being weird, I'm like, you know, I mentioned to some of my Democrat friends, I said, we're really the party that's weird. We're the party that creeps people out. We say we support life, but we're hostile and make ridiculous arguments about when life begins. And
James, love,
Yeah.
love, fascinated by what you're saying. Where do you live?
I'm in Phoenix.
Yeah,
And in Phoenix, so
did you vote?
I'm starting.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Hold on 1
I
second.
was just trying to say.
Yeah. Did you vote
Go
for
ahead.
Kamala Harris? Did you vote for Kamala Harris?
Oh yeah, I should have clarified that.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm a conflicted voter, and I want to vote my conscience cleanly. So in Arizona, we had an opportunity to do that. If you're a Democrat and you're a Christian, you can split your vote because the abortion initiative was on the ballot. So I voted against that and lost in a landslide with other Christians. And I voted for Kamala because I believe Democrats are not, Democrats want government to work. We want government to work for the people. And that's why we're different than Republicans. Republicans seem to be hostile towards government and governing, which
James,
to me seems very conflicted. So I don't want to talk about your guys' conflictedness. I can talk to our Democratic conflictedness, but I do want to ask a question for you.
Go ahead.
For you all.
Yes, sir.
How do you square, like I know that it's not going to happen because you're the party that's in power, and the party that's in power is never going to look at its own conflictedness. You're not going to deconflict until you run into it head on by being at cross purposes with your own agenda, or people get sick of you and vote you out.
James, I'm just going to ask you to ask your question if you would.
Yeah, well, I'm just setting my question up. I'm asking you,
I know you
where do you not see your own need for deconfliction in your policy and your people? Like, how is it that you're going to vote people in? You voted this administration in with the complaint that we weren't doing enough on the economy and we were going in the wrong direction and raising prices. And how do you not see your policy and your administration as totally conflicted in trying to achieve your own aims?
Thank you,
explain
James.
To me how you're going to deport.
He's got it.
Yeah, I don't think you do got it.
James,
explain to me how. Just
James,
let me finish my question.
No, James, I'm sorry.
Here's the question.
James, we've given you a ton of time.
I know.
If you don't let Sean talk now,
the broad question, the specific question is,
if you don't let Sean talk now, we're not going to answer your question. So that's your choice. You can stop talking and let Sean answer, or we can just move on.
I have a specific narrow question.
All right, James, thank you. I've never done this in the history of the program, James, but sorry, never done it. I apologize, but just there's so many people who want to get in and you weren't doing what we asked you to do. I apologize for those who think that was rude, but I tried so hard. Dan, welcome in New York. Tell folks where in New York you are, who you voted for president. What's on your mind, please?
So I'm in White Plains, New York, so a little bit north of the city. Very reluctant first-time Trump voter. I was looking for any excuse to not do that. I'm more of like a libertarian, think Justin Amash type right-leaning person. But I don't know, there just wasn't any policy reasons that Harris gave. She had ridiculous ideas in 2020. So it's one or the other. It's either you believe those and you're lying now, or you change your mind, explain how. But I don't know. It's just kind of a crazy situation that they couldn't give anyone any excuse. But sorry, a little nervous.
That's okay. No, that's right. Don't be nervous. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask a question, Dan, or do you just want to make that comment?
So you mentioned the Murphy tweets. I'd actually mentioned that to some of my family members, and one of the tweets in there was about like you have to accept people into your tent that believe other things. And he said, like,
That's right.
for example, climate and guns.
Mhm.
Do you think that the Democrats will get past some of these litmus test type of issues? And they're running against Trump, who, if you'd asked Republicans in 2014, free trade is a universal good question, it would have almost been universal that free trade is what we need to do, whatever, and Trump comes in and completely upends it. But
Yeah.
it seems like some of these issues on the Democrat side are, it's like you couldn't have, someone who, and Pennsylvania is a perfect example. They backed themselves so into a corner on fracking that they couldn't get out of the hole. So
Yeah.
I guess the basic question is, do you think the Democrats can get over these type of litmus test questions, or do they just not have, the personality of Trump that could just force
Right.
the issue?
I'll go first, then Dan, then Sean. So my first presidential campaign that I covered full time was Bill Clinton. And in 1990, he started to run effectively. And the party at the time was against the death penalty, against welfare reform, against right to work, and against NAFTA. And he supported all those positions. But he didn't just come out and kind of, babble them out. He defended them, and he explained why they were in the interest of Democrats to support, not just politically, but substantively. And I think, there are obviously other models, but I think that's what it's going to take. I think it's going to take leaders who aren't running for president, who say, yes, we're a big tent, but maybe also repudiate some of the positions that have been a problem. But the key is they have to believe it. Bill Clinton really did believe in free trade. He really did believe in welfare reform. He really did believe in the death penalty as a deterrent. He really did believe in right to work. If you believe in the things, rather than asking your pollsters, hey, where should I come down? And in the case of the vice president, I've said this many times, her political Achilles heel is she doesn't like to make difficult decisions under pressure. And confronting these hard issues, including fracking, she just wasn't good at it. She never really explained any of them. Her fracking explanation was, I think we can, save the planet while still having fracking. Just that's not going to convince anybody that she's on either side of it in a compelling way. Dan.
Yeah, I'll say two things. First off, Dan, you did a great job. Thanks for coming on. I think for all the Republicans on here, there are a lot of Dans who reluctantly voted for Trump. Now, if you're Sean and Republicans, you hope to lock them in and they never go back. But for my side, they're not that far. It was not a comfortable move to get in with Trump. So Dan, thank you for speaking up. I think to Mark's point, we're going to see this start playing out this summer when primaries start in the House, in the Senate, for governor, because the party can say inside the Beltway all it wants. We're going to be more tolerant. We're a bigger tent, right? We pulled it. We focus grouped. We know what we need to do. You got to go get the voters behind you. I mean, to your point about Trump, the entire establishment was against him in 15 and 16, but he built up a following the old fashioned way, and he kind of stormed the Capitol with the support of the people. Bad analogy maybe, but I think people get my point. That's what we're going to find out. How tolerant is the party? How willing are voters to rethink their own biases and embrace change and welcome people with dissenting views?
So a couple of things. One, I think a race that we'll probably have to talk about in the future is the race for DNC chairman. And I think the question comes down to, will the chairman of that party want to campaign on and or implement this idea of reflectively looking at the party writ large? When we did the Growth and Opportunity Project in 2012 at the RNC, as I've said before, it wasn't about the RNC, right? The building and the people that work there. It was about the party writ large. We made a lot of suggestions mechanically that talked about, we love to hoard all of the responsibilities as a party. So voter data, research, all that stuff. And we had a really tough conversation that said, we've got to let go of some of this stuff and allow soft money to be spent instead of wasting hard dollars. So there's that piece of it. Then there's the messaging and the policy pieces. And I think those are things that not just the party, but the candidates have to grapple with. So for example, when asked about the economy and inflation, Kamala Harris's answer was, I'm going to take on price gouging. Now, I don't think there's a person around that said, yeah, price gouging is the problem. Now, maybe it is in some areas. I mean, but the bottom line is, I don't think that the average person who's going to the supermarket said, yep, this is it. It's price gouging is the problem. So it didn't make sense. And that was part of the problem, is that there wasn't solid answers to basic questions. What are you doing about immigration and illegal immigration? What are you doing about the economy? And there's some basic fixes there about just messaging smart policies. And then I think the larger point that I think a couple of you are talking about is just this general respect of how do you get over, how do you get people who are religious and pro-life people, as our previous speaker, and say, or strong gun owners. I mean, even the thing where Kamala just throws out the fact that she owns a Glock, it just didn't, maybe she does. It was sort of like, really? So after 4 years, you suddenly come out as a gun owner? And some people will say she had previously disclosed that. I'm not getting into that, but my point is, it didn't seem authentic. And it also, it came off trite to people who care about the Second Amendment. So my point is that there's a messaging piece and a policy piece that go with this. The policy piece is rather easy to fix because there are solutions the Democrats have. We may not agree with them, but they can actually get into that. And then how they are messages is a whole separate piece.
Yeah.
Mark, you're muted.
Dan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, and just one other thought is like one of the big topics of the election was the abortion issue, and they thought women would turn out better. It's just one of the things that drives me crazy is Democrats tend to look at demographics almost as single issue voters, where they're not complex, whereas Trump's kind of broad policy view, he's not looking at anyone as a slice, you're this, you're that. He just kind of has his overall policies, and if you like them, you like them. If you don't, you don't. Where it's, okay, well, women care about abortion, so that's how we're going to get women. Where it's like they don't have any other issues that they care about that would override that, or like, okay, Trump says bad things about immigrants, Latino, most of the immigrants are Latino, so therefore Latinos will vote for us because of what he says about immigration. So they reduce a lot of these groups to overwhelmingly caring about a single issue instead of having this broad appeal. I'm curious if they'll change that at all, or they're so entrenched with identity politics.
You made such a really good point. Reince Priebus, my former boss, was on this week on the roundtable, made a really interesting point that I think is kind of ties into what you're saying. Everybody went all in, as we talked about on this program, on that comedian who made that stupid comment about Puerto Rico. Okay. And we talked about it for 4 days in the media, and everybody was going here, and it's going to cost Puerto Rican votes on the mainland or whatever. And Reince's point was, look at the Puerto Rican vote for mainland Puerto Ricans, whether it's Pennsylvania or in the I-4 corridor in Florida, and then look at the Puerto Rico legislature when all Republican, the former RNC committee woman is the new governor there, right? I mean, it was too far, and it was a bunch of people who think what other people should be outraged about, instead of going, okay, like that to me was, it was all in on a stupid comedian's failed joke. And the party needs to realize where people are, and clearly the vote showed from the mainland to the island that was not a factor, and it's too many times they're thinking these other people have to be outraged. And it's the same thing with a lot of the other comments, where every time Trump says something, there's all this sense that, like, how can you this is going to have this massive effect. It's not. People would rather have the policies. So I think that there's a lot of inflection about where they need to be, as opposed to just being anti-Donald Trump.
Yeah. Dan, grateful to you for coming on, overcoming whatever nervousness you had. As you know, this platform is not high intensity. So appreciate you coming on and sharing all the interesting stuff you did. Thank you. Sam, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, I'm from Arizona. I am a reluctant Trump supporter as well. First of all, let me just tell you how grateful I am for the platform. I don't feel like I can talk to my friends and family about politics or anything like this. So I just, I feel like I have to tiptoe around all these issues. So I'm so grateful to be able to just kind of hear what other people think in a very safe space. So
Thank you for that.
thank you. I just want to ask Dan, I guess. I'm a legal immigrant. I migrated when I was 8, so I don't take credit for it, but I got naturalized and went through a very long process. I remember I was, going through 5 years of all of that. And I just feel like Democrats don't really have a message for us. I heard the lady Friday say that 1 out of 10, I think she said, were legal. Somebody on the platform was saying that 1 out of 10 either are legal immigrants or know somebody or something like that. Anyway, I just would love to, because that's the thing that I always struggle with the migration issue, is that nobody ever speaks to those who did it the really long, hard, difficult, expensive. I mean, we gave up everything to come here. And my dad, who was a physician, and my aunts and uncles who are physicians, all kind of had to take dirt jobs for a while. And they're forever grateful. I mean, they're the biggest patriots you'd ever want to meet. But just wondering, like, with things like that and student loans and people who kind of, I guess as Americans, you're big on following the rules and wanting to do things the right way and working hard. And so, even just once, it would have been so refreshing to have a message from Democrats for those. So I'm just curious your thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
Sam, it's awesome you're on. Do you mind if I ask you just one brief question?
Yeah.
Why did you and your family come to the United States?
When?
What? No, just why?
Did you say
What attracted
why?
you?
Oh, well, just education. I think my father is a physician and did a fellowship at Harvard and at Yale, and just wanted to. He was studying public health, and so just probably a better life. And say the reason I guess a lot of people come, but just to do more education wise. And then he was offered a full-time position, so he was able to get naturalized and stay. And then we brought in all our aunts and uncles after that.
Well, that's great. I think for a lot of people, they want the same thing that I want for my kids and Sean and Mark want for theirs.
Sure.
A good job, a safe environment to raise your family, to be able to enjoy the freedoms of this country.
Right.
Rather than speaking to those things, the business climate, taxes, etc., Democrats would just say, look how awful Trump is and how he treats illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
And you just lose people. You're not, I mean, the number of stories that I read over the last 12 months of Latinos in Nevada and Arizona and North Carolina and Georgia who came legally, even those who came illegally, it's kind of like, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
We want a good job. We want a safe street. We don't want to.
Yeah, that's why we came.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And it's been the case since the founding of our country. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, and Sean said it a minute ago. The only animating principle that has brought the party together the last 9 years has been hatred of Donald Trump, and that everything, just how evil he is and how outrageous things are. And we stopped talking to voters about how we would help them
Yeah.
and what we could do for you.
But I guess what I mean is, like, even before Trump, there was a sense that, you should just be okay with these people coming illegally because they want what you want, when you've spent years trying to do it. And I've had aunts and uncles that would give anything to be here right now. So I guess that's what I mean, like, to speak to people who did it the right way, to speak to people that, to say, something, anything, I know that this might seem unfair to you or something, so that those who, because I mean, there's nothing worse, I think. Somebody kind of described it as, you spend three hours in line for a ride at Disneyland, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of people just walk up and they just go up. But just something to make you feel like, that they understand that there's a group of people that feel like they've completely been slighted, or they're stupid enough to do things the right way, that kind of a thing, I guess.
Sam, I don't think the party thought there was a problem until about a year ago. Like, I don't think they thought illegal immigration was a problem. And now almost everyone in the party says, we have a problem with this system and we need to fix it.
The irony of this, the strategy from the Democrats was the people like Sam who came legally that could vote were with my side. The people that the Democrats were defending legally can't vote. And so they were on the wrong side of the mathematical equation. And I think I'm glad you brought that. I mean, it was funny when you made the Disney comment. I was thinking in my head the same thing. You know, there's always that jerk that usually it's me that jumps in front of that queue as you're trying to get to the off ramp or something and slides up around the cars. And you're like, you got to be kidding me. I've waited here for 3 minutes and this guy's trying to sneak in. And no matter what, there's a sense of feeling that you're getting screwed. And frankly, that's what a lot of the Trump messaging is about DC, is that there's a bunch of people
And
who
the same with the student loan issue, I passed up some really difficult, some wonderful schools because, you don't want to have a ton of debt afterwards. Same thing with my kids who are both in college, we're not going to do it that way. And yet you see that, you see just hundreds and thousands of dollars being wiped. And it's the same thing. You sort of just feel like Democrats, to me, start to look like, people that don't appreciate those who do it the hard way or the right way, or choose not to be in debt, or, all the things that your parents told you to avoid, So anyway, that's
as I've said before, I mean, if people come to America because they appreciate it being a nation of laws, you can't begin your journey by breaking a law. Like it's a fundamental tenet of of respect for the place that you want to get in. And I think we are a very welcoming country. And I think we have problems with our legal immigration system, but that doesn't mean that you get to decide, well, I'm going to break this particular law because I don't want to. It's funny. I was down at the border 2 weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago now. And when I was asking the agents what the biggest issue was, the first thing that, they said, we need to respect the law. And I said, okay, what does that mean to you? They said, when you come over the border the first time, it's a misdemeanor. The second time, it's a felony. And one of the deputies looked at me and said, I've arrested the same guy or apprehended the guy same time 29 times. And I said, well, I don't get it. He goes, we're not allowed to enforce the law, and everyone knows it. And I think that that's a fundamental problem when we're basically flouting the fact that we're not going to enforce laws in this country.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you for joining us.
Thank
We hope
you.
you'll come back regularly. Thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
guys.
All right. So a few things before we go. Sean has an announcement about an upcoming program if you're a job seeker. Sean.
Yeah, so Dan and I have both gotten pinged from people. It's on Sunday, November 17th at 7 p.m. Mark your calendars now. We'll do a special two-way like this where people can ask questions, and it'll stream as well, so you can put it in the chat if you don't want to be on, but about how to get a job in politics. So if you want a campaign job, Dan's been a chief of staff on the Hill and obviously done very well in the campaign side as well. So whether it's looking for a government administration job or a Hill job or a campaign job, we'll take your questions and give you our advice. We're not making calls. Well, maybe Dan will. He's nicer. But I think that if you know someone who wants to break into politics and just have some questions, Sunday night, 7 o'clock. The Patriots play earlier that day, I believe, so that's not going to be a problem. Anyway, so look forward.
It's the first annual two-way job fair with Sean and Dan. So join us for that. Tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'll be back with two-way tonight. Amongst my guests, James Marcus, who's the head of the Boston College Republicans. And they've been facing some, what they say is harassment from other students in the wake of Donald Trump's victory. So we'll talk about free speech on campus. We'll talk about the rights of individuals and the strong feelings that people have on both sides. So see you tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then again, get ready. If you're a Democrat, bring your best ideas, your best policy ideas, leadership ideas, communications ideas. We're going to gear up for this ongoing discussion on both this program and two-way tonight about how the Democrats can look productively towards the future. Grateful to everybody who asked questions. James, thank you for your question. Sorry I had to cut you off. Grateful to everybody who raised their hand. Plenty of hands up when we ended. Sorry we didn't get to as many of you as we would have liked. Please come back tomorrow and ask and raise your hands again. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow, and I'll see you tonight at 6. We'll see you tomorrow at 9.